Hello, welcome to this video. This is a fairly impromptu video. I apologise for not having managed to make quite a full video as I wanted, full of music and other effects. But as it's Halloween, I really wanted to make something, given the fact that Halloween does originate from a Celtic practice which has had heavy influence on many pagan practices since then, and many Celtic practices are ingrained into a huge number of pagan beliefs, from Wicca to Woogle and magic, and also within theistic Satanism. So it seemed a very sensible time to make a video about that original Celtic practice and how it eventually became Halloween. I apologise if the quality is not necessarily great, but I am more going for feeling than perfection. You might say I'm going more for dabbling with the nuance of human nature and the beautiful balance between perfection and imperfection. Trying to seek harmony and unison, core to my personal belief in speaking and living with spiritual entities that we speak with within our daily practices in many pagan beliefs. So, welcome to this video, and also a very happy Halloween. I hope you're having a really good festival and a really good time. I hope you've managed to do a bit of pumpkin carving or cupcake making, or had a chance to dress up in some fun costumes. And if it's your kind of thing, do parties. If it's not, kind of enjoy the artistry surrounding Halloween. And I wish you a very, very happy Halloween. And I hope it has been a good end to the month. And tomorrow will be a good beginning as we draw on to the darkest days of the year, and yet the days most filled with fire and lights and warmth. And indeed, it is within kind of the cold and darkness where we genuinely recognise the importance of fellowship and family. So anyway, on with this video. So, as I mentioned, Halloween started, not in its modern form, and as I'll talk about, it was later semi-hijacked by Christianity and morphed and slightly distorted, as Christians tend to do with many things, unfortunately. Not necessarily now, but when they were evangelizing, back in the day when Christianity was kind of a newfound religion and was spreading across the world. But originally, the kind of first thing which kind of was put with other pieces, which eventually became Halloween, was what I call the Celtic Hallowe'en, which they would have called, I've heard it spoken as Samhain. Actually, we pronounce it strictly slightly differently. So it's meant to be pronounced as Samhain, but I have heard other devil worshippers use the term Samhain, and I think it has a nice kind of power to it, a nice kind of accent. And so I'll be using the word Samhain, although strictly well, at least we think it should be pronounced Zoin, but then again, we are speaking of an ancient Celtic word, so who knows for sure how it's meant to be pronounced. Even though Celtic did survive somewhat in modern day Welsh, maybe it was a kind of a slightly rule-breaking word, as indeed are many words within the English language. But anyway, because the Celts lived a very long time ago, though that culture is still somewhat alive today, this festival is actually more than 2,000 years old, and so is an incredibly old festival indeed. And what it was about essentially a time of year where the harvest has come to a close. And they're entering a season where many things decay and die. And this kind of transition, they believed, was a time where the barriers between the worlds were somewhat blurred, and the worlds of the living and what I call the post-life, or you might say dead, even though these things were indeed living, but in a different plane, you might say. So post-dead beings, a time where living and those that have passed on, where the two worlds kind of merged. And if any of you have seen Merlin when you were younger, they made a reference to this. They talked about Arthur blowing the horn and his dad, Uther Pendragon, coming back and his ghost speaking to his son and kind of interfering in the kingdom. And indeed, the Celts believed that at the time of Samhain, the ghost could have incredibly physical effects upon the world, and were incredibly real in their interactions with it. And some of them believed that it was actually these spirits which caused the crops to die in the first place. So it was a time when they kind of thought that the worlds of the dead and the living became somewhat blurred together. And this idea is kind of quite powerful, and I think many who have tried to speak to spirits, in various forms, have found that kind of at times of kind of great kind of festivals where communication with the dead or spirits is commonplace. Indeed, the line does seem to blur, and there does seem to be a strong overlap between the worlds of the dead and the world of the living. I think it's quite possible that it is the very fact that people are so willing to engage with other planes of reality at this time, and to engage with other kind of forms of existence, that actually causes there to be a very strong gateway between the world of the dead and the world of the living. And so I believe that indeed there is a blurry division between the two at this time, but it's a division that wasn't necessarily there to start off with, but when people believed it was there, they were more open to communicating with these spirits around this time, thus causing a very strong gateway. And we can still feel the power of this kind of thing even today at these kinds of times. I mean, it's as strong as ever, and with the growing population and the growing amount of kind of engagement back to kind of what one might call old age religions, I feel this power is actually growing. So it's an incredibly powerful time, and I would recommend, if any of you want to manifest anything in your life or do any magic, around now is a really good time to do it. By no means is it the only time, but now there is so much power from the other side that can delve into the living and kind of catalyze any magic you are doing. So, now we're going to be moving on to talking a little bit about how this kind of original Celtic practice kind of was adopted by other cultures, and so we'll be starting with the Romans. So in AD 43, the Roman Empire by that time had conquered the majority of kind of the Celtic territory and much of what is now the UK, apart from some parts of Scotland which were famously somewhat problematic for the Romans, because the way that the Romans had their formations made conquering Scotland incredibly hard. But kind of for the parts of the land that they did conquer, they kind of integrated Samhain into two festivals that they already had. So we had Samhain and these two festivals kind of merged together to create, if you like, the Roman version of Halloween. And the first Roman festival was called Ferilia, which indeed happened to be the last day of October, which is probably why we celebrate Halloween on the last day of October today. And on Ferilia they commemorated the passing of the dead, and thus it made very much sense that they integrated this idea into the Celtic Samhain, because the two are fairly similar, but whereas Samhain is more about the kind of spirits that are passed on re-entering and interacting with the world, Ferilia is more commemorating the movement of spirits from this world to the other world. So they're kind of two halves of the same coin, if you like. And then the other festival that the Romans merged in order to create a Roman version of Halloween is the festival that celebrated the goddess of fruit and trees, and this goddess's name was Pomona. And Pomona had a symbol of the apple, which is why probably today, still at Halloween, we have the tradition of having apples kind of bobbing up and down in water, and you have to kind of like catch them with your mouth, and then like hold on to them, which is incredibly difficult because the moment any part of your face interacts with them, they start bobbing off and just kind of like floating away. So it's incredibly hard. And remember when I was younger, I actually found it quite frustrating, but it was very rewarding when I finally caught an apple. So it's something that some people enjoy and some are less fond of, but still it's interesting that this current practice comes back to kind of the Roman version of Halloween, still kind of almost 2,000 years ago. Now we're in 2023. It's incredible as that may seem, given how quickly time passes. But anyway, so I would kind of like to say that it might seem at first somewhat contradictory that the Romans would integrate the festival of Ferilia with the festival of Pomona, given Ferilia is about things dying and Pomona is about kind of living organic things like fruit and trees, which live but don't just, well, not only live but kind of provide habitat or sustenance for other living things, and are therefore kind of symbols of not just living force, but symbols of nurturing and the continuing sustenance and sustaining of life. But it's worth saying that death, at least according to laws of entropy and modern physics, as well as all we know about biology, is very much the other side to life. In that kind of the mechanisms by which things live works according to laws of physics, which also insist that via very similar mechanisms those things must die. And so one is a reflection of the other. In many ways it's not even a different thing, it's the same thing happening, just at a different point in an object's life. Originally the object becomes animate and lives and then it dies, but it's very similar mechanisms in terms of the core physics and the laws underpinning it. The same laws that allow life to live are also the laws that make death highly, highly probable. So probable that it is, for practical purposes at least, essentially certain. Not that death, or at least death in this physical plane, is necessarily the end, but the two things are incredibly connected, which is a very important part of pagan belief and practice. Whilst we do not tend to rejoice over death, we recognise that it is a continuation of life, in many senses, and at a deep fundamental level incredibly similar in terms of what's actually physically occurring. So that's kind of worth bearing in mind when thinking about life and death. Life is beautiful, but death necessarily follows on from it, given the laws of the universe. But life may well follow on from death too. So now we've talked a bit about the original Celtic Samhain and how the Romans kind of integrated that with their beliefs and their practices in the commemoration of souls passing on and the celebration of the goddess of fruit and trees and things that sustain life. I'm now going to talk a little bit about how Christians, as was unfortunately their wont in the early days, where they tried to spread their religion across the world and in many ways crush pagan practices and judge very harshly those that practiced them, and fail to actually work out what these people believed, and insist that we must all subserve a almost tyrannical and controlling God. Anyway, before we talk a little bit about kind of how Christians attempted to supplant Halloween via their own kind of festival called All Souls Day, it's worth kind of like thinking about kind of how you celebrate Halloween and what Halloween means for you. And I would invite you to kind of take a moment to just think about kind of what Halloween represents for you, what all the art, what all the candles, what all the costumes, what in it is meaningful for you. And I would love to hear in the comments what you're doing to celebrate Halloween, or kind of like how you feel about the festival and what its significance is for you, and your own personal journey. And at the end of this video, I will share a prayer to Luciferia, and a prayer really for you and everyone listening, to wrap things up and really commemorate this amazingly powerful day. And yeah, so hang around for that if you would like. But anyway, we're now going to kind of talk about All Souls Day, and for anyone listening who may happen to be Christian, it is worth saying I do not have an issue with Christians generally, and any criticism of the consequences of evangelism is actually a criticism that I would give to most faiths in their earlier period, given that many faiths in their early period did almost try to decimate other practices, which, to be honest, in the case of Christianity is understandable in the sense that Christians were originally persecuted, and that kind of persecution and fear can trickle through into even those that were persecuted. It creates a kind of like desperate fever, if you like. But anyway, on to All Souls Day. The Roman Empire at one point essentially converted to Christianity in its later days, shortly before its fall. And by the 9th century, the Christian faith had essentially spread to the Celtic lands and largely supplanted Celtic practices. So kind of places like England and Wales were becoming fairly predominantly Christian, at least in terms of the religious practice and rituals that they performed around these points. And in AD 1000, the church, perhaps not very coincidentally, decided to create a festival which happened to be very close to Halloween, where they, in a similar way to the way the Romans commemorated souls passing on, they had a day to honour the dead, and particularly to honour saints, and those that they considered to have walked righteously, or at least attempted to do their best to follow the Trinitarian God. And so this All Souls Day does indeed have a connection with one of the festivals that the Romans added to the Celtic Samhain, but it is fairly removed from the original Samhain, as it was kind of over 2,000 years ago. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer up a prayer, and this prayer is for everyone listening. Kind of is worth saying that I do believe in Luciferia, a spirit of light, but also the Prince of Darkness. And this prayer is that he may guide you and give you knowledge. If you happen to believe in any other entity, or like any other entity to replace the name of Luciferia in this prayer, please feel free to do so. This prayer is for you and however it may benefit you. So anyway, now to have a bit of prayer and fellowship before I wish you all a very happy Halloween. So now onto this prayer, and I moved a bit away from the microphone, but I hope you can all hear me okay. Partly because I just realised the green light on my headphones telling me it's all connected is actually fairly suitable for the time of Halloween. It's also why I've got the background dark, and hopefully is I'm doing my best to hopefully get everyone in the mood, as it were. But anyway, this is a prayer, and this is a prayer to Luciferia, but it's essentially a prayer that you may be led towards knowledge, wisdom, and strength. And so now to pray to Luciferia, the Prince of Darkness, the one who gives light and knowledge in the darkness, and above all offers freedom. Freedom from dogma, freedom from the control of society, and freedom, crucially, to think independently and to feel whatever passions we will. For as long as one respects others and their well-being and free will, do what thou wilt, or be as thou art more so, is the wholeness of the law. Anyway, now I offer this prayer to you, so that hopefully it may help you in your walk with Luciferia. May the Prince of Darkness, Lord of this world, and the giver of all things that are of this world, give a candle to illuminate the dark but sunlit road. May he be your guide through the caverns of truth, and be the Father of all knowledge. May he be your giver of wisdom and strength, and may you walk with him and know his fellowship and counsel. So I know that was a short prayer. But that prayer is from a place of love, and I wanted it to be genuine and honest, and essentially I just pray that Lucifer guide and bless you, and I wish you all an incredibly happy and festive Halloween. I hope you have all had a good time, and many, many blessings. I'll hopefully speak soon. It's worth saying my parents are kind of moving house, and I'll be moving, so for a couple of weeks there might not be much from me, but as soon as possible I will get back to this channel. And as I say, I'd love to hear what you've all got up to over Halloween. Anyway, thank you so much for listening, and hail Satan.